Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to Taylor-Made-Cards4u. Well, today I'm excited to share with you one of the new products that came out at Creativation. And these are, of course, the Distress these are the Distress Embossing Glazes. And I decided that I wanted to buy all of the colors rather than just try one out. And the reason I did that, I don't typically kind of go all in if I haven't tried out a product yet, but when I saw some of the demonstrations on what you can do with some of the coloring, I knew I wanted them. And there were some great videos that Tim Holtz put out there. But I wanted to go ahead and kind of play around with these a little bit, so I thought I'd turn on the camera and share with you some of my results. Now, you guys know that I love paper dolls. So when I saw the ability to color some of these paper dolls with some of these glazes, I was in. And I know that there's lots of other ways that you can color your paper dolls. In fact, I've shared a lot of videos doing that. You can do it with your distressed crayons, your distressed inks, even some of your distress pens. But what I liked about this is once you color it, it gives it that pop of that shine, because again, this is embossing powder for the most part. He's calling it glazed, but it will pop and it will give you that shine, and it really makes your paper dolls stand out. So like I said, I went ahead and I went all in and I got all the colors, and let me just pull these out really quick here for us. And what's nice about when you decide to kind of go in and get all the colors is there are some deals out there that will enable you to get some discount when you buy in bulk. So I'll make sure that I leave all the links to those below for you at the end of the video. Now, one of the ways to color the paper dolls that was demonstrated was using these embossing pens, and these were great, I thought, because it's going to make it a lot easier to actually color up your paper dolls when you're putting your embossing glaze on it. And what's wonderful about these is not only can you use it on your paper dolls, but you can use it on any of your black and white prints here. So I have a few of these that I'm going to go ahead and kind of practice on and demonstrate on film, so you guys can get an idea of what the capabilities are of this. One of the newer items out there are these baseboards, and I wanted to show you the difference because I'm not sure how I missed this, but when I was actually shopping, I saw these and I'm like, what? How did I miss this? And these are paper dolls made out of chipboard. So the difference here is your paper doll is thinner, and then your baseboard paper doll is a little bit thicker. So this will, they're both great, don't get me wrong, but I think this will be a little bit more sturdier, especially for some of those you know, collage boxes that we're creating. And it will pop up a little bit more because it's a little bit thicker. So there is a difference here. So I thought we would go ahead and try out both of these with the glazes along with some of the other items. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to test out here are these distress pens, and this is something that is new that came out this year. And what I really like about these is you can control the marker and where you're actually putting the embossing, the embossing ink, I guess is really what it is. It's embossing ink in a pen. You can control the embossing ink, and you can color exactly what you want to color to make sure that your embossing powder is going to go exactly where you want it to go. Most of our embossing is done with pads, right? So you're going to put it on an ink or on a stamp, or you're going to put it on a surface, but you really don't have the control that you have with this pen. So that is one of the great things that came out this year, to be able to color these paper dolls. Now, the colors, like I said at the beginning, I got all of the colors that were in the pack, and the colors match your distress inks. So you're going to be looking at the same types of colors that you would ordinarily be looking at when you're working with your distress product. Now, you're not going to get every color that's in the distress line, and I'm not sure if Tim or Ranger have any plans on adding more colors in the future. I'm sure if this is a successful product, they probably will be adding some of the other colors. But the colors that we're able to work with are your peeled paint, and that's your green. You also have a fired brick, which is going to be your, like a brick color, like a red. You have, see here, you've got weathered wood, which is going to be great for some of your backgrounds. You've got your fossilized amber. You've also got antique linen. And then for your darker tones, you've got hickory smoke. And then another dark tone is your walnut stain. And walnut stain is a great one, especially for those men paper dolls. And then the last few colors that I have here are vintage photo. I've got tattered rose. And then I've also got the cracked pistachio. So you have a good palette here. You have a good color base to be able to work with. So it's a good start. So when you're working with coloring your paper dolls, you're going to do it just like you would if you were coloring it with a marker. You're going to just outline exactly where you want to color in, and then you want to make sure that there's enough ink, of course, to catch your embossing powder. Now, what's really cool about this is you can use different colors for different parts of your paper dolls. So when I started coloring up this girl here, I wanted the flowers on her shoulder to be one color. So I went ahead and I added my embossing pen to her flower corsage. And then, as you can see, I got some of the embossing powder or the embossing glaze, and I added it right to the paper doll. Now, this little scooper is a scooper that I bought a while ago, and I really hadn't used it because typically when I use my embossing powder, I just kind of get a white piece of paper like I did here, and I pour it onto whatever I'm embossing. I move it around my card, and then any of the excess I'll just put right back into the bottle. But here, it was such a small area that this little scooper, I guess, worked really well because I was able to control exactly how much of the embossing powder I actually added to my paper doll. And then once that was dry, then I can go ahead and add some more of my embossing ink from my embossing pen to the dress. And here I'm working over all of the areas. Now, one thing that I noticed, and you're going to see as I go along through the video here, is when you're adding the ink to your paper doll, you may not get full coverage the first time. And it's really hard to see exactly if you've got the full coverage because, again, your embossing ink is clear. So you may not be able to see exactly what you've got. So you may have to do a couple of layers, and that's not a big deal. But what you want to make sure is that when you are doing several layers, that you let the first layer dry. And I was a little anxious when I was working with my paper dolls, I'll admit it. And I didn't necessarily let some of my ink dry when I was coloring them. And you may get some of that plastic or some of that embossing powder on your embossing pen. So just be mindful of that if you are going to do a few layers, and you probably will have to do a few layers, make sure that your embossing powder or your embossing glaze, I keep saying powder, but your embossing glaze is completely dry. And then that way you won't get any of the plastic residue on your pen. Now, as I went along adding the embossing glaze to my paper doll, one thing that I found is that the colors are very vibrant, and I was really pleased with the results that I got. Like anything, you guys, this is going to take practice, and you're not going to be an expert the first time that you do it. And this is my first time, so I am by no means an expert of coloring my paper dolls. So you're going to have to get some practice. You're going to have to kind of get a feel for how your embossing pen is going to work. And like I said, you're probably going to have to go over it a couple of times. But the more that you heat your embossing glaze, it's going to get a little bit wet and move around. So kind of keep that in mind. So you'll be able to get your full coverage at some point if you just keep working it. Now the color that I'm working with for the dress is the Fossilized Amber, and I'm going through again. I'm adding my embossing ink on the areas that didn't quite catch, and I'm going to come through with the second round here to add my powder. But as I was going along, and as I mentioned, the colors match the distress line, so you could easily pull out an ink, a crayon, paint even, to cover up some of the areas that you may not have covered, and this will give you probably a little bit of a different tone. And that's something, again, you're going to want to experiment with. Pull out your colors, pull out the colors that are the same, and mix your mediums, and see what kind of results that you get. You probably will get some different shading because, again, you're working with different mediums, but the color will match, and I just think that's going to be really cool. And that's what I ended up doing here. I went ahead with my second round of my embossing glaze, and I'm adding it to the dress, and I'm just kind of topping off the top part of the dress here, and then I'm going to move to the bottom part of the dress. But again, I'm not going to get the full coverage, and that's okay because I'm going to come in with one of my distress crayons, and the results are pretty spectacular, I have to say. Now another product that came out to work with some of your distress glazes is a distress dauber, and it's similar to the pen, but it's an actual dauber with your distress ink. Now you might be able to use this product actually with some of your areas on your paper doll that are a little bit bigger. So for instance, the bottom of the dress, I might have been able to come in with a dauber to add a little bit more ink. And that's something I'm going to have to try. But keep in mind, if you're working with a dauber, you have a bigger surface, and there is a bigger possibility to actually get ink on areas you may not want. So while you might be able to use your dauber, for bigger areas, keep in mind you're not going to have the control that you may want. So as you can see here, when I added my glaze, there's a lot of white still showing, and this is where I'm going to bring in another medium to see if I can kind of clean it up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and continue on adding a little bit more of my ink here to get some of the bigger spots, and then I want to say that I'm going to bring out a distress crayon to cover up some of the areas. So this is what I was talking about, where you're not going to get the full coverage when you're actually coloring up your paper dolls. So just kind of keep that in mind. And you might want some of those white streaks coming through. You might want to maybe even add different colors. One of the colors that was available is your antique linen, I believe. So maybe you want to add some of that to match, to use some of the color mixture as well. So just experiment, see what kind of will work for you. And so once again, I'm bringing out the heating tool and I'm drawing it up. And as you can see, little by little, I am getting my coverage onto my paper doll. And while you want your heating tool to be hot, keep in mind that if it's too hot, you might start pushing some of that embossing glaze around, which might be all right. That might help with your coverage, but you're going to have to get a feel for it. I mean, it definitely is a new product, and like anything that's new, we're going to have to kind of get in there and play with it a little bit and kind of get into our comfort zone with it. And that's really what I'm doing here, is I'm just kind of testing out the product to be able to see exactly what I'm able to do with it. And as you can see, when I was heating it, some of that color kind of moved to the edge of the paper doll, which actually kind of looked pretty cool because it looks like it outlined it and it gave it a little bit more darker of an edge. But I still didn't get the full coverage that I wanted, and this is where I decided to come in with my distress crayon and just kind of fill in some of the gaps. And it worked really well, and it's great that these colors are matching the distress line, because if you do have to come in with a different medium just to fill in some of the gaps, you're able to do that and your colors will match pretty well. And then after I finished adding the fossilized amber to the dress, then I came in with some gathered twigs just to outline the edge, just to give a little bit more pop. And this isn't necessary at all, but I like the contrast. I like seeing my outlines, and that's why I decided to bring in my gathered twigs to outline my paper doll. And just a little bit of the ink carries over onto the fossilized amber, using my finger and my thumb to kind of smear it in. And I just really like the fact that it looks like a little bit of a shadow. And then, as you can see, once you're finished here, the contrast between the black and the fossilized amber is really, really nice. And your dress just pops because, again, you're using your embossing glaze, which is the same as your embossing powder, which is very fine plastic particles. And when you dry it, it's just going to shine just like plastic. So it really is a nice addition to the paper dolls, and it enables us to bring these little characters to life. All right, so now that we see what we can do with these paper dolls, we're going to go ahead and move on to another black and white image from the Ideaology collection. And I was really anxious to color up this gentleman because of his derby hat and his suit. And there's some really great colors in the Distressed Glaze line. So we're going to go ahead and, using our embossing pen, we're going to go ahead and just kind of outline the hat, and we're going to color it in, and we're going to add some of this embossing glaze. And I want to say that the color that I'm going to be using here is the, I think I used Vintage Photo, and I may have also used the Walnut Stain. I can't remember exactly what colors I used, but I think I brought both of them out so we can go ahead and color these up. And what's great about these is you can go ahead and, you know, add your first color, dry it, and then you can come in with the second color as well. And then once we have it covered, we're going to go ahead and come in with our Distressed Glaze and pour it right over the derby hat to get the coverage. And this little scooper that I'm using, it really works great for this because I don't necessarily want to pour all of my embossing glaze all over my photo. I'm able to control exactly how much I put on it, especially since I am only working with a small surface. And like I did with the paper doll, I'm going to be adding a couple of layers here. So I'm coming in with my first layer, and then I will grab my heating tool and go ahead and dry it. And then I will come in with the second layer just to finish off the areas that I didn't quite get covered. So I hope that this video has succeeded in kind of introducing you to these distressed glazes. I'm really excited about this new medium, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of experiment with it and see what we can do with it. The distress pen is perfect for coloring your paper dolls and some of your other black and white images, and it really gets enables you to get some of the detail in coloring up your images, and it brings these characters to life. I just love the results that I got when I was playing with them. And like I said, this is the very first time that I've used these glazes, and I just know with practice I'm going to be able to kind of perfect my coloring skills and make these characters just pop out even better. And I'm going to continue to experiment with some of the other mediums, mixing them in with my glazes. I know some of the demonstrations that Tim gave us in Creativation, he indicated that you can actually use your distress or your glazes with water, not just your embossing ink. So that's something that we're definitely going to give a try, and we're going to see if we can get some results using just water rather than some of your distress inks. I really hope that you've enjoyed just my playing around today. Like I said, I really wasn't intending on creating anything. I just wanted to pull out this new product that I just got my hands on and play with some of these paper dolls. So as always, I'll leave a list of the products that I've used to create some of these paper dolls and the coloring of them, as well as the links to the stores. I got the bundle, but you can definitely get some of these distress glazes individually if you're not quite sure yet. Maybe you just want to try it out. But I think that the colors that they provide are just a great starting color palette for us to use with some of our other distress lines. So if you've enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because like I said, I do plan on doing a lot more videos using some of these distress glazes and just playing around just to see what we can do with them. All right, everybody, I really appreciate you stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.